The dust has barely settled on the Dutton Ranch, but the fight for justice in Montana is far from over. When Kayce Dutton trades his cowboy hat for a Marshal's badge, he discovers that protecting the law in the American West means facing enemies more dangerous than anything his family ever encountered. Power, corruption, and violence collide in the newest chapter of the Yellowstone universe, where one man must decide how far he'll go to bring order to a land that's always been ruled by chaos. In the sprawling landscape of Montana, where mountains touch the sky and justice often comes at the end of a gun, a new kind of lawman is about to emerge. Kayce Dutton has spent his entire life straddling two worlds, the world of his powerful ranching family and the world of a man trying to forge his own path. He's been a Navy SEAL, a livestock agent, and a son caught in the crossfire of his father's empire. But now, Kayce is stepping into a role that will test everything he thought he knew about right and wrong, about family and duty, about the price of peace in a place where violence has always been the first language. The United States Marshal Service is recruiting, and they want men who understand the land, who know how to survive in the harsh terrain of the American West, who can think like the criminals they're hunting because they've walked in similar boots. Kayce Dutton fits that profile perfectly. He's seen death up close, dealt it out when necessary, and lived with the consequences. He knows what it takes to protect what matters, even if it means sacrificing pieces of his own soul in the process. When the opportunity comes to wear the badge, Kayce sees it as more than just a job. It's a chance to finally be the man he was meant to be, separate from the shadow of John Dutton and the weight of the Yellowstone Ranch. But becoming a marshal in Montana isn't like enforcing the law anywhere else. This is a place where federal jurisdiction meets frontier justice, where vast territories hold countless secrets, and where criminals have learned to use the wilderness itself as their greatest weapon. Kayce quickly discovers that his new role will take him into the darkest corners of the state, tracking fugitives who've mastered the art of disappearing into the mountains, confronting drug operations that have corrupted entire communities, and facing domestic terrorists who believe the federal government has no right to enforce law in what they consider sovereign territory. Every case is a matter of life and death, and every decision Kayce makes could mean the difference between bringing someone home safe or adding another name to the list of agents who've fallen in the line of duty. The team Kayce joins is as diverse and complex as Montana itself. There's the veteran marshal who's seen it all and carries the scars to prove it, a man who's lost faith in the system but still shows up every day because he doesn't know how to do anything else. There's the brilliant analyst who can track anyone through digital footprints and financial records, but who's never fired a gun outside of a training facility and struggles with the violent reality of the job. There's the former FBI agent who transferred to the Marshal Service after a case went wrong, haunted by the people she couldn't save and driven to make sure she never fails again. And there's the local deputy who knows every back road and hidden hollow in the region, a Montana native who understands that sometimes the old ways are the only ways that work. Together, they form an unlikely unit, bound not by friendship but by the shared understanding that they're all that stands between civilization and chaos. Kayce's first case as a marshal throws him into deep water immediately. A high-profile fugitive with connections to organized crime has escaped federal custody during a transport through Montana, and intelligence suggests he's headed for the Canadian border through some of the most remote and dangerous terrain in the lower 48. This isn't just any criminal. He's a man who knows how to survive in the wilderness, who has resources and allies scattered throughout the state, and who's already killed 2 people during his escape. The clock is ticking, and if Kayce and his team don't catch him before he crosses the border, he'll disappear forever, likely to continue his criminal enterprise from beyond the reach of American law. But tracking this fugitive means going into territory where cell phones don't work, where backup is hours away if it can reach you at all, and where one wrong step could mean freezing to death or falling into an ambush. As Kayce pursues his target deeper into the mountains, he begins to realize that this case is connected to something much larger. The fugitive isn't just running, he's meeting with someone, picking up something that powerful people want to keep hidden. evidence points to a conspiracy that reaches into the highest levels of Montana's business and political establishment, involving land deals, resource extraction, and the kind of money that makes people willing to kill to protect their interests. Kayce recognizes some of the names that keep appearing in the investigation, people his father dealt with, allies and enemies of the Dutton family. He's forced to confront the uncomfortable truth that the world of corruption and violence he's trying to bring to justice isn't separate from the world he grew up in, it's the same world, just viewed from a different angle. The deeper Kayce goes into his investigation, the more he realizes that wearing a marshal's badge doesn't make the moral complexities of Montana any clearer. If anything, it makes them more complicated. In his old life, loyalty was simple, family first, always. But now he serves the law, and the law doesn't care about loyalty or history or the complicated relationships that define life in Montana. When evidence in his fugitive case leads back to someone connected to the Yellowstone Ranch, someone his father once called a friend, Kayce faces an impossible choice. Does he follow the evidence wherever it leads, even if it means betraying the trust of people who've known him since he was a child? Or does he look the other way, compromise his oath, and become exactly the kind of corrupt lawman he swore he'd never be? His team watches him closely during this crisis, aware that Kayce Dutton comes with baggage. They know about his family, about the Yellowstone Ranch, and the power the Duttons have wielded in Montana for generations. Some of them wonder if he can really be trusted to enforce federal law impartially, or if his loyalties will always be divided. Kayce feels their doubt like a weight on his shoulders, and he knows that every decision he makes is being judged not just on its own merits, but as evidence of who he really is and where his true allegiances lie. The pressure is immense, but Kayce has faced pressure before. What's different now is that he's truly alone. He can't call his father for advice, can't rely on his family's power to protect him, can't fall back on the Dutton name to open doors or smooth over problems. The fugitive Kayce is tracking proves to be as intelligent as he is dangerous. He's been leaving false trails, spreading disinformation, and using his criminal network to stay one step ahead of the Marshals. Every time Kayce thinks he's closing in, his target slips away, moving through the landscape like a ghost. The pursuit becomes personal, a battle of wills between two men who both understand survival and strategy. The fugitive starts sending messages directly to Kayce, taunting him, trying to get inside his head. He knows about Kayce's past, about his time in the SEALs, about his family. He tells Kayce that they're not so different, that they've both killed for what they believed in, that the only difference is who's pinning the medals on their chests. It's psychological warfare, and Kayce has to fight to maintain his focus and not let the fugitive's words create doubt about his mission. Meanwhile, back at the Marshal's office, Kayce's colleagues are dealing with their own cases, and the audience gets a glimpse of the variety and intensity of threats facing Montana. There's a domestic terrorism cell planning an attack on federal facilities, motivated by anti-government ideology and armed with enough weapons to start a small war. There's a trafficking operation running through the truck stops in small towns, exploiting vulnerable people and moving them across state lines. There's a witness protection case gone wrong, where a key testimony in a major organized crime trial has been compromised, and the witness is now being hunted by professional killers. Every case is a matter of life and death, and every decision Kayce makes could mean the difference between bringing someone home safe or adding another name to the list of agents who've fallen in the line of duty. Kayce begins to understand that being a marshal is more than just tracking fugitives and serving warrants. It's about understanding people, their motivations, their fears, their desperation. Many of the people he encounters aren't career criminals. They're ordinary people who made bad choices, who got in over their heads, who are trying to protect someone or something they love. Kayce finds himself sympathizing with some of the people he's supposed to be bringing to justice, seeing in them echoes of his own struggles and compromises. This empathy makes him a better marshal in some ways, allowing him to anticipate behavior and negotiate peacefully in situations that might otherwise end in violence. But it also makes the job harder emotionally because he can't maintain the professional distance that protects other law enforcement officers from the psychological toll of the work. The relationship between Kayce and his wife Monica becomes strained under the pressure of his new career. Monica has always worried about Kayce's safety, from his time in the military to his work on the ranch, but being married to a federal marshal brings a whole new level of danger. She knows that every time he walks out the door, he might not come back. She sees the stress in his eyes, the way he checks weapons before bed, the nightmares that wake him in the middle of the night. Her son Tate is getting older, asking questions about what his father does, why people want to hurt him. Monica wants a normal life for their family, but she's beginning to realize that normal might never be possible for Kayce Dutton. The tension between them builds with every dangerous case, every late night, every time Kayce has to cancel plans because duty calls. As winter descends on Montana with brutal force, Kayce's pursuit of the fugitive reaches a critical point. Intelligence suggests the target is holed up in an abandoned mining complex deep in the mountains, a place that's been closed for decades, but that local legends say is still being used by criminals for everything from drug manufacturing to illegal weapons storage. The terrain is treacherous, the weather is deteriorating rapidly, and the isolation of the location means that if something goes wrong, help won't arrive in time. Kayce's superior wants to wait for better conditions, but Kayce argues that any delay gives the fugitive more time to escape or fortify his position. Against his better judgment, the superior authorizes the operation, but makes it clear that if this goes sideways, Kayce will bear the responsibility. The team that goes in with Kayce is small but highly skilled. They move through the snow-covered mountains with tactical precision, using every bit of cover and concealment they can find. The mining complex is a maze of collapsed tunnels, rusted equipment, and buildings that look like they could collapse at any moment. As they clear the structures one by one, the tension ratchets up with every empty room. Then, the shooting starts. The fugitive isn't alone. He's brought in reinforcements, mercenaries with military training who've turned the mining complex into a kill zone. What was supposed to be a fugitive apprehension turns into a firefight in conditions that would challenge even the most experienced combat veterans. Kayce's SEAL training kicks in as bullets fly, and his team takes cover. He moves with practiced efficiency, directing fire, coordinating movement, keeping his people alive while trying to capture or neutralize the hostile forces. But this isn't a military operation in a foreign country. This is law enforcement on American soil, and that means rules of engagement that are far more restrictive. Kayce has to make split-second decisions about when deadly force is justified, knowing that every shot he fires will be scrutinized and second-guessed. In the chaos of combat, he sees one of the mercenaries preparing to fire a rocket-propelled grenade that would kill his entire team. Kayce doesn't hesitate. He takes the shot, dropping the man before he can fire. It's a righteous kill, clearly justified, but Kayce will still have to live with having taken a life in the line of duty. When the smoke clears, the fugitive is dead, killed in the crossfire. The threat is neutralized, but Kayce feels no sense of victory. 2 of the mercenaries survived and are taken into custody, but they're not talking. The intelligence that led them to the mining complex proves to be only partially accurate. Yes, it was being used for criminal activity, but the scope of that activity is much larger than anyone suspected. The team discovers evidence of a major drug distribution network, connections to international cartels, and financial records that implicate several prominent Montana citizens. What Kayce thought was a straightforward fugitive case has blown open an investigation that will take years to fully unravel, and that has political implications reaching all the way to Washington. Back at headquarters, Kayce faces the administrative aftermath of the shooting. There's an investigation, interviews, paperwork. Every decision he made is analyzed and debated. Some people in the office see him as a hero who saved his team and shut down a dangerous criminal operation. Others see him as a cowboy who took unnecessary risks and escalated a situation that might have been resolved peacefully. Kayce doesn't care much about either opinion. He knows what happened in that mining complex, knows that he did what he had to do to protect his people, but he also knows that he's crossed a line, that he's killed again after promising himself that his days of taking lives were behind him. The psychological weight of it settles over him, like the Montana winter, cold and heavy and inescapable. The investigation into the drug network leads Kayce into the world of organized crime at a level he's never encountered before. These aren't small-time dealers or local thugs. These are sophisticated criminal organizations with lawyers, accountants, and enough political connections to make them nearly untouchable. The money flowing through Montana from drugs, illegal gambling, and human trafficking is staggering, and it's being laundered through legitimate businesses, real estate transactions, and charitable foundations. Kayce begins to see how deeply corruption has penetrated Montana's institutions, how many people are being paid to look the other way, how the veneer of civilization in the West is thinner than most people realize. It's disillusioning and infuriating, and it makes him more determined than ever to see justice done. His determination puts him in danger. As Kayce digs deeper into the criminal network, he starts receiving threats. Not the kind of threats crude criminals make, but sophisticated psychological operations designed to make him back off. His family is photographed without their knowledge. His home address is posted on encrypted websites used by criminals. Anonymous tips are called in suggesting that Kayce himself is corrupt, that he's been taking bribes, that he's protecting certain criminals while pursuing others. It's all lies, but mud sticks, and Kayce watches his reputation take hits even among people who should know better. The threats against Kayce escalate from psychological to physical. Someone takes a shot at him outside the marshal's office, a high-powered rifle round that misses by inches and embeds itself in a brick wall. The shooter escapes, but the message is clear: back off or die. Kayce's family is placed under protective custody, moved to a safe house while the threat is assessed. This separation tears at Kayce, who's already struggling with the demands of the job and the strain it's placing on his marriage. Monica makes it clear that she's reaching her breaking point, that she didn't sign up to live in fear, that their son deserves better than a childhood spent looking over his shoulder. Kayce wants to promise her that everything will be okay, that he'll keep them safe, but he's honest enough not to make promises he might not be able to keep. The attempted assassination triggers a massive investigation. Who ordered the hit? Who was the shooter? How did they know where Kayce would be at that specific moment? The answers point to a disturbing possibility. There's a leak inside law enforcement, someone feeding information to the criminals. The paranoia that sets in is corrosive. Kayce finds himself suspicious of his colleagues, wondering who he can trust, questioning every conversation and every decision. His team notices the change in him, the way he's withdrawn, and it affects their operational effectiveness. Trust is the foundation of any law enforcement unit, and once that foundation starts to crack, everything becomes more dangerous. Kayce decides to take matters into his own hands. Using contacts from his SEAL days and his family's connections in Montana, he launches his own investigation parallel to the official one. He starts tracking financial records, looking for unusual patterns, following money trails that might lead to the leak. What he discovers is shocking. The corruption goes deeper than anyone suspected, involving not just local criminals, but also federal agents who've been compromised through a combination of bribes, blackmail, and threats. Some of these agents are Kayce knows, people he's worked with, and the betrayal cuts deep. He realizes that he can't share what he's learned through official channels because he doesn't know who's clean and who's dirty. The situation comes to a head when Kayce is ordered to participate in a major multi-agency operation targeting the leadership of the drug network. It's supposed to be a coordinated strike hitting multiple locations simultaneously, designed to decapitate the organization and seize evidence before it can be destroyed. But Kayce suspects it's a trap, that the leak has compromised the operation, and walking into this raid could mean walking into an ambush. He tries to voice his concerns to his superiors, but without concrete evidence of who the leak is, his warnings are dismissed as paranoia brought on by the stress of the assassination attempt. Kayce is told in no uncertain terms to follow orders or face disciplinary action. On the night of the raid, Kayce makes a decision that could end his career. He secretly alerts his family to be ready if things go wrong, leaves detailed notes about his investigation where they'll be found if he doesn't survive, and goes into the operation prepared for the worst. The target is a ranch in the middle of nowhere, supposedly being used as a distribution center for drugs coming up from Mexico. As the tactical teams approach, everything seems normal. Too normal. Kayce's instincts are screaming danger, but the operation is already in motion. Then the shooting starts, not from the target location, but from their flanks. The criminals knew they were coming, set up a counter-ambush, and turned law enforcement's own tactics against them. Officers go down in the first volley. Radio communications are jammed. What should have been a controlled operation turns into a desperate fight for survival. Kayce takes command of his section of the operation, using his combat experience to organize a fighting retreat. He's running on pure adrenaline and training, moving wounded officers to cover, directing suppressive fire, calling for backup on every frequency he can access. The battle lasts for what feels like hours, but is probably only minutes. When reinforcements finally arrive and the criminals break off their attack, the scene is carnage. 3 federal agents dead, a dozen more wounded, and the targets of the raid have escaped. It's the worst disaster in the Montana Marshal's office in decades, and there will be hell to pay. In the aftermath, Kayce becomes a controversial figure. Some people blame him for not being more forceful in raising his concerns about the operation. Others see him as the only reason more people didn't die, praising his tactical command under fire. An internal investigation is launched to determine how the operation was compromised. Kayce knows he has to find the leak before the investigation is shut down, or before whoever's responsible